in a small town on a dusty road. There's a podcast studio where stories unfold. Every Friday at the break of dawn, Lily hits the mic, the show must go on. She talks about love and heartache, laughs and cries with every twist and break. Stories of people and podcasting, from dusty boots to the love they're giving. Lily's voice is warm like a summer's breeze as she tells tales of life with ease. From the porch swing to the front porch light, she brings it all alive every Friday night. Lily's voice is warm like a summer's breeze as she tells tales of life with ease. From the porch swing to the front porch light, she brings it all alive every Friday night.
I've been really annoyed about a lot of stuff. I won't talk about that.
Welcome to Podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is your host, Lily Abernathy. Episode 7. Super producer Brian Redban Reichle. Brian Redban, humorless, man-child, mother's boy, unappreciated. My first experience with Brian Redban was on the Joe Rogan Experience, which at the time Brian produced. In fact, Brian is actually a podcasting super producer. He is responsible for helping start a number of famous podcasts, ranging from YMH, JRE, to Kill Tony, and Brothers in Cursive, to name a few. Redban is very much a product of his time, the 80s. He likes the quintessential loud merchandising and advertising. You can see the influence in some of his production style and own merchandising and advertising. Things like bright colours, pixelated graphics, loud obnoxious noises, fart humour, trucker hats, quick camera twitches, etc., etc. Much like fellow child of the 80s Kanye West, he likes old anime like Akira and is a mother's boy. He's also a big fan of brands and obsessed with the fast food chain Wendy's, but in a disturbing way, like masturbates to a Wendy's doll type way. If you're wondering if I dislike Brian Redban, I'm not sure I can honestly answer that question. I've seen him do stand-up multiple times, and I don't think he is that great at it, and has been reusing the same material for years now. I think he is annoying with both his comedic timing and humour, like constant bathroom-type jokes. I think he understands comedy, but is just incapable of emulating it himself in a proper way. This could very well be due to the company Brian has kept for a number of years. Many people with dissimilar interests. Maybe he just never found the proper community to support his comedic talents. But he certainly found the right community to be financially stable. Brian actually has had a great influence over all of podcasting. Known to many people as the producer of Kill Tony, Brian's original start in the comedy world was with Doug Stanhope. Brian, in his younger years, was working for Gateway Computers. Look it up if you are under the age of 30. He at some point started doing some video work for comedian Doug Stanhope. This led Brian to Joe Rogan. Rogan was impressed with the work Redban had done for Doug and invited him to do filming for his stand-up tours. Brian and Rogan would become friends, and Redban would eventually make his way to California. Brian would eventually help Joe Rogan start his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. Brian was also the person who filmed the infamous Carlos Mencia incident at the Comedy Store. Brian, around this time, would also start an internet, TV, streaming, podcasting type thing known as Death Squad. Death Squad would be the beginning for a number of podcasts, including Your Mum's House and Kill Tony. He would also help start the super-duper famous but short-lived podcast Brothers in Cursive with David Lucas and some hillbilly ginger. Redban would eventually be replaced on Your Mum's House with a different producer under the name of Blue Ban, better known as Nadav. At some point around 2013, it seemed that Brian had been removed from the Joe Rogan Experience due to a lack of technical knowledge. I'm sure it had something to do with his constant interrupting on the podcast as well. That would often break the flow of the show. This would lead Redban to an up-and-coming comedian at the Comedy Store that went by the name of Tony Hinchcliffe. They would start the infamous podcast known as Kill Tony, now an arena act, and please don't you ever forget it. Seriously, they won't let us forget. They literally bring it up every chance they get. Redban did it yesterday on his live stream. We all know that watching open micers perform in an arena for the first time is the best way to do it, and not just retarded at all. If you listen to this podcast, then I'm sure you are aware what Kill Tony is and how popular it is amongst the comedy community. Or maybe you're aware of just how hated it is depending on your circle of friends. But for future listeners and possible people that don't know, Kill Tony is a draw a name from the bucket-style talent show for comedy only. If you are selected from the bucket, you are to perform 1 minute of stand-up comedy. You will then be questioned by the panel. The panel always consists of Tony and Redban and whomever the week's guests are, usually 2 other comedians. We honestly can't condone this show. To each their own, but the entire premise of the show is essentially to shit on the people trying something that is basically impossible. At best, we receive a mild amount of humour. It's literally 1 minute. It allows for basically nothing to happen. It only exists to make Tony look good. At this point, I do have to give Brian some credit. He more than anybody else involved with the show, and more than most comedians, actually helps people. Brian, while not that funny himself, can definitely see the potential in others. Many people who do well on Kill Tony are invited to Redban's comedy show known as The Secret Show. I've seen Redban do this for a number of up-and-coming comedians, time and time again. If we are being honest, The Secret Show is probably better for most of these people's careers than Kill Tony. The chances to do well and the negative effects from bombing and interacting with the panel far outweigh any potential benefit from doing Kill Tony. The show is not only live, but taped and distributed on all podcasting platforms for the world to see. The Secret Show, however, is usually a mix of well-established comedians and up-and-comers, where they can actually perform longer than 1 minute. As of recent times, it also seems that Brian and Tony's relationship is a bit on the rocks. It seems that both of them need each other. Since the show is the most successful thing in both of their lives, they can't stop. However, tension between them can easily be seen on the show. Tony is regularly seen berating Redban for seemingly no reason more and more often, not even being funny, just outright mean to him. As someone who is your business partner for over 10 years now, this seems a bit extreme and reiterates why the quality of the show is the way it is. If you would like more information on the rising tension between Tony and Redban, please check out Mike Redbar, as he explains this situation best. Tony seems to seemingly support the most hack acts through his Kill Tony Regulars program, or whatever you would call it. While I've never been particularly fond of the show, it may as well be even more of a circus than it was originally. It literally just exists, so Tony can suck his point. That chicken burger joke too, just already. Brian is all over the place for me. I honestly don't know how to feel about him, other than I think he's more famous than he should be. We would also like him to give us credit for inspiring his recent ventures on his live YouTube shows. Brian does not seem like a bad or malicious person, especially compared to some of his associates. I don't think he is a particularly good producer, given the equipment and money he has access to. I mean, imagine doing this on a laptop in a third world country or something. I don't think he's that great at comedy, and I believe his personal taste are a bit typical and played out of a person from his time period. But at the same time, there is a good chance I probably wouldn't be here doing this right now without his dumbass influence on podcasting. If someone as dumb as him could help that many people become millionaires, then why not someone that actually has talent and isn't lazy? At least he isn't dead, or wrapped up in any weird controversies like other people in the LA community. And at least he has a pretty cute Asian girlfriend that we're sure he does weird sex stuff with that makes Tom Segura super jealous. This week's episode is brought to you by the Billionaire Podcast Network. Anyone familiar with Dalton Pruitt of the Corn-Fed podcast and stand-up comedy fame knows he has been speaking of having a business manager. Like most of you, I believed this was probably a joke. As it turns out, this is not only not a joke, but his business manager contacted me. Why? You might be wondering. Well, I was contacted about joining the network. I accepted the offer and am very excited. I never thought that in such a short amount of time we would get the attention that we are, let alone be contacted about a network. I am truly humbled and am looking forward to the future with the Billionaire Podcast Network, which will be coming soon. You may have also noticed that we have a video element this week. After watching the most recent JRE with Paul Stamets, he mentioned a story about author Frank Herbert and how the blue liquid from Dune was actually real. We decided to contact Mr. Stamets for the exact method in which we should use to create the liquid and tried it ourselves. It seems we are currently in another plane of existence, and this is what you are witnessing. Remember, Tony, watch Dork Court. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Follow us at Podcast the Pod on X, formerly Twitter. This has been Lily Abernathy, signing off.